Born in 1839, John D. Rockefeller would go on to become one of the great robber barons and industrialist tycoons of American history. By the turn of the 20th century, Rockefeller controlled 90% of the oil refineries in the U.S. through his company, Standard Oil, becoming, in the process, America's first billionaire. Of course, in 1911, Standard Oil was ruled by the U.S. Supreme Court to be an illegal monopoly in violation of antitrust laws and forced to break up. Like his father, John D. Rockefeller had built his success on illegality, cons, scams. Still, this was not enough for Rockefeller. He wanted more. At the time, chemicals made from oil, known as petrochemicals, were being discovered and developed in the U.S. This included the discovery that pharmaceutical drugs could be made from oil, which Rockefeller saw as an opportunity to expand his empire. The key was that petrochemicals, unlike natural health remedies, could be patented, presenting an enormous opportunity for Rockefeller profits. There was only one problem. At the time, natural, herbal, and traditional medicines were very popular in the U.S. Something like half of the doctors and medical colleges in the country were using holistic medicine, natural remedies, and knowledge taken from indigenous Native Americans. Before we continue, we'd like to thank ExpressVPN for sponsoring this video. ExpressVPN provides top-notch encryption that will secure all of your sensitive information from hackers and protect your online privacy. We often use public networks while accessing our YouTube account, but every time we connect to an unsecured network, anyone connected to the same network can easily steal your information like financial details, account logins, etc. That's why we always use ExpressVPN to make sure our data doesn't get compromised. When we work from home, we're also using them because internet providers can see and track every website you ever visit. All you need is just one click, and your privacy is protected. So stop letting people keep logs of what you do online and visit expressvpn.com/Universe Inside You to find out how you can get 3 months free. Rockefeller needed a way to eliminate the competition, to create a monopoly in medicine as he had done with oil. And so, he went to his good friend, Andrew Carnegie, another robber baron who had gotten rich through his monopoly of the steel industry, and incidentally, one of the country's leading eugenicists. Together, the two men hatched a plan to take over American medicine. From the cover of the Carnegie Foundation, they would send a man named Abraham Flexner around the country to report on its medical colleges and hospitals. After visiting all 155 medical schools existing at that time in the U.S. and Canada, he completed the seminal Flexner Report in 1910. Following the directions of his employers, Flexner called in his report for a total restructuring of the American medical system, most specifically for the pushing aside of natural and traditional remedies in favor of Rockefeller pharmaceuticals. The report even specifically mentioned the eradication of dissidents, appropriately since this is exactly what happened. Almost immediately after the report was issued, medical schools teaching things like naturopathy, homeopathy, electromagnetic field therapy, and so on, were told to drop these things or close. More than half of all medical colleges in the country did close, and many non-compliant doctors were demonized and even jailed. But Rockefeller and Carnegie went further, offering huge grants to medical schools and hospitals so long as they only taught and practiced Rockefeller medicine, and allowed Rockefeller agents on their boards of directors to ensure compliance. It was the carrot and the stick. Those who agreed got funded with big money. Those who didn't were crushed. In this way, all medical colleges in the country were streamlined and homogenized, with doctors all learning the same thing: how to use and prescribe Rockefeller's patented drugs. But, like any good monopolist, Rockefeller went further in seeking to consolidate his control. He took over the AMA and emboldened it as the gatekeeper of scientific thought and witch hunter of alternative medical practices. He took control of the FDA in order to control the approval process for new drugs. He even founded the American Cancer Society in 1913. Within a few short years, Rockefeller was in total control of the American medical system in both thought and action. The result of this takeover, the product of this monopolist son of a con man and his eugenicist partner, would become known as Big Pharma. That Big Pharma took over and monopolized American medicine, promoting their own patented profit-making products and suppressing all others, isn't even a conspiracy theory. In fact, it was recorded for all to see in 1953. In the early 1950s, U.S. Senator Charles Tobey enlisted an investigator with the Interstate Commerce Commission named Benedict Fitzgerald to examine allegations of conspiracy and monopoly in medicine. Tobey had become interested in the issue after his own son had gotten cancer and been given less than 2 years to live by orthodox medicine before pursuing alternative treatments and being cured. The resulting 1953 report, known as the Fitzgerald Report, was truly shocking. It concluded that Big Pharma had been involved in a conspiracy of alarming proportions. First, there was the organized effort to hinder, suppress, and restrict the free flow of drugs which allegedly proven successful in cases where clinical records, case history, pathological reports, and X-ray photographic proof, together with the alleged cured patients, are available. On top of that, public and private funds have been thrown around like confetti at a country fair to close up and destroy clinics, hospitals, and research laboratories which do not conform to the viewpoint of medical associations. The report even noted that Big Pharma had conspired to suppress at least 12 promising cancer treatments, including mentioning hoxotherapy by name. It was an unfathomably damning report, making clear that the tentacles of Big Pharma conspiracy to suppress alternative medicine were everywhere. But as it turns out, the report did not go far enough. Oftentimes, when a new natural cancer treatment appears, the assertion from the medical establishment is that the new treatment is either unproven or disproven. There is no better example of what this really means in the era of Big Pharma than the case of a cancer treatment called Laetrile. In 1952, a year before the Fitzgerald Report, a biochemist named Ernst Krebs proposed that cancer was a deficiency disease which could be cured with a compound called amygdalin, found in over 1,200 plants, and most specifically in the seeds of apricots. By extracting this amygdalin from apricot kernels, Krebs created a product he called Laetrile. Over the course of many years, Krebs conducted numerous lab experiments on animals which showed that Laetrile was an effective cancer treatment, that somehow it caused cancer cells to self-destruct. By the 1960s, a doctor named John Richardson had picked up the research and had even begun treating human patients with Laetrile. Unsurprisingly, the Rockefeller-controlled FDA launched a massive media campaign against Richardson and Laetrile, claiming that the treatment was toxic and dangerous. By 1971, the FDA officially banned Laetrile, and in 1972, they stormed Richardson's clinic and arrested him. But even after Richardson was jailed, people kept asking about Laetrile, writing to government officials, medical journals, and scientific labs, demanding answers. At this point, Big Pharma knew they had to put their foot down once and for all. They needed to undertake official testing which proved that Laetrile didn't work. The testing would take place at Memorial Sloan Kettering Cancer Center in New York City, and what would happen next would come to be described as one of the biggest medical cover-ups the world of cancer research has ever seen. The tests would be led and directed by Dr. Kanematsu Sugiura, known at that time as the preeminent cancer researcher in America. He had over 60 years of experience, publishing hundreds of academic papers on the subject. As one scientist said, "When Dr. Sugiura publishes, we know we don't have to repeat the study, for we would obtain the same results he has reported." In 1972, testing began, with laetrile being administered to mice with many different types of cancerous tumors. At its completion, Dr. Sugiura concluded that laetrile stopped the spread of cancer, inhibited the growth of tumors, and acted as a cancer prevention. It even provided relief from pain and improved general health. This seemed to be incredible news, except there were 3 Rockefellers sitting on the board of Sloan Kettering, as well as a dozen more people representing companies making big money from Big Pharma. When they caught word of the test results, all hell broke loose, and another round of tests was ordered. Unfortunately for Sloan Kettering executives, the second round of testing only confirmed the first, except this time, with 2 confirmed tests from the legendary Dr. Sugiura in the books, mainstream media was forced to cover it. Had a cure for cancer really been found? They asked. Sloan Kettering officials refused to speak with the media, refused to discuss the results or answer any questions, saying only in a pre-written statement that a third round of tests had been ordered in order to clarify the results, as if they had not been twice clarified already. In this third test, a new wrinkle would be introduced. Dr. Sugiura would be blinded. He would not know which half of the mice would be receiving laetrile and which half would be given a saline solution, as if this eminently respected scientist was going to somehow manipulate the results. After 4 weeks, Dr. Sugiura could see which of the mice were being given laetrile, since mice in some of the cages had fewer and smaller tumors, while mice in the other cages showed no effects. Sloan Kettering overseers who were supervising the project confirmed to Dr. Sugiura that he was correct. For a third time, laetrile's cancer-treating properties were confirmed. Except arguing that Dr. Sugiura was no longer blinded since he knew which cages were which, Sloan Kettering officials shut the tests down. They would try yet again to get the results they were looking for with a 4th test. This time, not only would Dr. Sugiura be blinded, but the mice who were receiving the treatment would be mixed together with those who weren't. Dr. Sugiura warned that this was dangerous because there was no dependable way to ensure the lab techs administering the treatment would be able to identify the correct mice every time. And in fact, this is exactly what happened. Some of the mice who were purportedly only being given a saline solution saw their tumors stop growing. "There's something funny here," Dr. Sugiura professed. The something funny was that the treatments had been mixed, with many mice receiving some laetrile and some saline solution, just as Dr. Sugiura had predicted. Yet in this case, the legitimacy of the results wasn't important to Sloan Kettering's Rockefeller board. Immediately they announced that results from the experiment do not confirm the earlier positive findings of Sugiura. Then they called a press conference, attended by most of mainstream media, and declared laetrile was found to possess neither preventive nor tumor regressant, nor anti-metastatic, nor curative anti-cancer activity. The exact opposite of what the first 3 tests had shown. At the end of the press conference, the floor was open to questions from the media, which is when things took a dramatic turn.
Dr. Sugiura, do you agree with the conclusions in the summary statement?
What conclusion?
The conclusion that laetrile, in effect, does not either cure or prevent cancer.
I agree. Of course, my results don't agree, but I agree what our institute said.
Why? Your results don't agree.
Oh, I don't know why, but I think good.
Do you stick by your results?
Yes, I stick. I hope somebody able to confirm my result later on.
Has any other of your results ever been disputed before in the 40 years that you've been here?
I'm here almost 60 years. Nobody dispute my work. Every paper I send to the publication always accepted.
Why not this?
Eh?
Why not this one then? Why not these results?
No, this result also accepted by the publication, Journal of Surgical Oncology.
Doctor, are you then not convinced that your findings may very well be confirmed at some future date?
You mean?
What you found, the findings that you found. That
Yes, I'm hoping that somebody able to confirm my result.
The next month, Sloan Kettering executives appeared before a Senate subcommittee hearing to decide the fate of Laetrile. While it had been banned by the FDA in 1971, some states were challenging this decision. At the hearing, Sloan Kettering executives asserted, "There is not a particle of scientific evidence to suggest that Laetrile possesses any anti-cancer properties at all," totally ignoring the 3 full lab tests of scientific evidence from the preeminent cancer researcher in America. As a result of the testimony, Laetrile was officially banned nationwide by 1980. Afterwards, Dr. Sugiura was asked why Sloan Kettering was so against Laetrile. "I don't know," he replied. "Maybe the medical profession doesn't like it because they are making too much money." When Big Pharma says an alternative treatment has been disproven, this is what they mean. But what about if tests were not done in a Rockefeller-controlled lab? What if one were to do their own tests, build their own case studies, and present them to the appropriate authorities themselves? One man provided an answer. Stanislaw Brzezinski was a doctor of biochemistry who immigrated to the U.S. from Poland in 1970, where he took up a position as a researcher and assistant professor at Baylor University in Houston, Texas. There, he discovered something which he called antineoplastins, naturally occurring molecular switches in the human body which Brzezinski asserted the body used to control cancer growth. At first, Brzezinski's discoveries were well received by colleagues. In fact, so impressive was his work that he was offered a tenured position in Baylor's Department of Pharmacology. He should have been thrilled, yet Brzezinski knew that if he accepted, he would lose his independence as a researcher. So, he refused the position, instead choosing to found the Brzezinski Research Institute in order to continue his work. On his way out the door at Baylor, his boss warned him, "Just wait, Brzezinski. They're going to kick your ass." In short order, Brzezinski and his clinic were investigated by local medical authorities for using unapproved medications, while the Rockefeller-founded American Cancer Society put antineoplastins on its unproven methods list, and those who had been funding his research pulled their support. In 1983, the FDA filed a lawsuit to get him to shut down his operation, and when this failed, FDA agents and federal marshals simply raided the Brzezinski Research Institute and seized over 200,000 confidential documents. Still, Brzezinski continued on. He raised millions of dollars through his institute to pay for clinical trials for antineoplastins, money big pharma companies are more than happy to spend since they know they will recoup it when their products are patented. By the mid-90s, he was able to provide the FDA with 60 clinical trials, meeting the requirement for their Phase 1 testing. For another decade he worked, compiling hundreds more clinical trials, meeting the requirements for Phase 2 of testing on his own at the cost of millions of dollars. In 2011, Brzezinski began Phase 3 testing, which involves thousands of participants and can last for years, again, at the cost of many millions of dollars. He was closing in on the finish line by 2013, which is when the FDA stepped in and put a stop to the trials. Their reason? They complained that the Brzezinski Research Institute was doing all of the testing when, of course, this is simply how the FDA approval process works. The only difference is usually the testing is being done by a big pharma company. Finally, in 2017, the FDA canceled anti-neoplastin clinical trials for good, refusing Brzezinski the right to even conduct the tests. Moreover, Brzezinski had his medical license revoked and was fined hundreds of thousands of dollars for his trouble. The point made by Brzezinski and his anti-neoplastins by Sloan Kettering's Latril trials is simple. It's a case of you're damned if you do and damned if you don't. If testing is conducted in a Rockefeller big pharma laboratory, it will be repeated and repeated and repeated until it gives the desired results, no matter how manipulated these results might be. And if you conduct the tests yourself, spending millions upon millions of dollars, the results will still not be accepted. Big Pharma controls the testing. They control approval. They control academic thought. But look closer, and it goes even further than that. Big Pharma employs 1,270 registered lobbyists in the halls of government. More than 2 Big Pharma lobbyists for every member of Congress, at a cost of over $200 million per year. They also spend tens of millions of dollars every year financing political campaigns. Nearly every member of Congress is funded by Big Pharma. On top of that, Big Pharma lobbyists and executives are repeatedly put in charge of the government bodies tasked with overseeing the pharmaceutical industry, like the FDA. Simply, the production and sale of medicine is tightly regulated by government, and Big Pharma controls the government. Is it really so hard to believe that Big Pharma would use its control of academia, science, and government to suppress valuable information for their own profit? In reality, suppressing truth for profit is as American as apple pie. From the 1950s, when tobacco companies fought to suppress lung cancer knowledge as people died, to modern times, when oil companies insist that the debate around climate change is still ongoing, even as the consequences scientists promised decades ago are all around. But pharmaceutical companies, those purportedly tasked with providing health, would they really suppress a cure for cancer and kill people? Actually, that Big Pharma would knowingly and intentionally kill people for profit is not conspiracy. It is established fact, admitted on record in American courts. In October of 2020, Big Pharma flag bearer Purdue Pharma pled guilty in court to criminal charges for its role in the American opioid crisis, agreeing to pay some $8.3 billion in the settlement. Opioids were a new type of synthetic pain medication that emerged in the early 1990s, which big pharma companies like Purdue aggressively promoted while suppressing information about the dangers, most specifically, the extreme addictiveness. Today, not only is chronic pain more prevalent than ever in the U.S., but nearly 1 million people have died from opioid overdoses, and another 3 million have fallen victim to addiction. In pleading guilty at trial, Purdue Pharma admitted on record to having supplied drugs without legitimate medical purpose. In other words, the purpose of opioids wasn't medical. It wasn't to cure pain. It was to get people addicted so they'd buy more. Purdue even admitted to paying off health insurance companies to deny coverage for alternative care, forcing people to take opioids, and paying off doctors to overprescribe their product to patients. By February of 2022, 4 more of the largest big pharma companies had reached a $26 billion settlement for their own role in the crisis. These, along with Purdue, are the largest and most powerful pharmaceutical companies in the country, the ones who lobby governments and sit on medical boards. And here they are, on the record, poisoning people for profit. Apply this knowledge to cancer specifically and think about what chemotherapy is. The treatment was first conceptualized by doctors examining soldiers who had been exposed to mustard gas during World War II. Noticing that mustard gas had toxic effects on the blood cells of soldiers, doctors surmised that it could be used against cancer cells. This was how the first version of chemotherapy and model for all subsequent versions was created, from a compound used as an agent of chemical warfare. This is what Big Pharma is telling cancer patients to put in their body. Of course, it is no big secret that chemotherapy is toxic. Cancer patients are warned that side effects can include everything from vomiting and nausea to infertility to organ damage and even death. They are even warned it can lead to a second cancer. In other words, patients are told chemotherapy might treat their cancer, but that it might also cause cancer. It might save their life, but it might also kill them. As one former president of the American Chemical Society succinctly put it, chemotherapy does much, much more harm than good. A bit like opioids. But that's the point. There are no profits in the cure. Big Pharma needs people sick, so that people need more and more expensive treatment. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed the video, please hit the like button, and if you're new, hit subscribe and the bell next to it for future notifications.